Glad y'all made it back. I see some that make it back, but that's all good. Hopefully they're okay. We're going to be in Genesis 39 tonight, and hope I weren't too long this morning. But like me and Landon was talking this morning, about long services. Well, I remember when Brother Randy used to come. We were talking about it this morning. When you leave here, it'll be 10:30, it'll be 11 o'clock getting home. And I enjoyed them then. It didn't bother me. Hey, I've been in services that last 15 minutes and been something lasted almost 2 hours. And hey, it don't bother me. When you hear, you hear. When you're in the Spirit, you're in the Spirit. When you ain't, you ain't. Sometimes it hits, sometimes it don't. But anyway, we're going to be in Genesis 39 tonight. And I wanted to talk a little bit about integrity. And when you're thinking about integrity, and you think about the men in the Bible with integrity, I want to talk a little bit about a man named Joseph and the things that he went through. We know that Joseph went through a lot of things and a lot of downfalls in his life and a lot of triumphs in his life. And we know that the book of Genesis ends with him and after he helped Egypt out of their famine throughout the corner. Let's go ahead and take a reading here. It said, and Joseph was brought down to Egypt. Now, first of all, let me just add a little bit of background, and we already know that Joseph was a favorite son of his daddy, and we know he had the coat of many colors. We know he interpreted a dream before his daddy and his brothers, and we know that his brothers weren't too fond of him. We know that when his brother was out feeding the sheep, and he had went down to meet him, and they said, look, we're going to get rid of him. And they were going to kill him, decided not to kill him. So then they threw him in a pit, and they said, well, let's get him out and let's sell him into slavery. So then he was sold into slavery, and then it's going on. So now let's pick up. He said, and Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. So, we know that at different times in our life, sometimes that we think when things is going good, there's things that's put in our path that's just completely out of the realm. But, how about God knows what he's doing at certain times of our life? Well, not just at certain times, but all times of our life when we come through. And we don't understand why things happen the way that they do and the things that we have to go through. But sometimes it takes that to build the integrity to put us from the person that we was to the person that we can be, because we got to realize our failures and our downfalls before we can get our upheavals. We have to go through, and that's why I was talking with someone one day, and we were just talking about politics and prayer, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people and stuff, and I tell them, say, look, I think that a president needs to be at least 70 years old. I mean, that's just my opinion. And why do I think that? Because it's got to be somebody with experience, somebody that's went through some things. Just because you went to college and you got a little degree don't mean that you can rule a country and you can rule the world and be a president in your 30s and 40s. And yeah, if we look at our administration now, as far as the economics of it, the top 4 advisors on the economy only has 6 years of experience. The average person's got less than 2 years of experience on the economy. And we wonder why the economy is in shambles the way that it is. And some of the companies that we deal with that on our job, that used to be good companies, and now they've got people that coming out of college just trying to run these companies like Cummins and Caterpillar and places like that. They're running the companies down because they're depending on somebody with no experience, that's never crawled through any ditches, that's never had to go through the bottom and come up on the other side. And that is one thing that builds integrity. You've got to crawl through some ditches, you've got to get some scars on you, and you've got to come up on the other side. I was thinking yesterday, in fact, me and Donald was talking about last night, it's been almost 19 years since I got ran over. And, it don't seem like it's been that long, but, a tragedy struck my family that day. And, and through all that tragedy, it helped me to learn a lot of things and overcome a lot of things, get through there. In Joseph's life, he had to overcome a lot of tragedies to get to where he needed to be, because you need to learn to lose a lot before you can realize how to be a winner. He said, look, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. So it's obvious that the Lord had put his hand on Joseph. Everywhere that he went, he knew, because of the integrity Joseph had, that he was born with, and that he was going to come through these things, and by God's help, he was going to be able to triumph through it all, through his whole. I think he ended up dying at 110, I believe it was, when he died. And the thing about it is, could you imagine, you cover a lot of ground in 110 years, and you have a lot of downfalls, but you have a lot of triumphs also. But look at what happened to him. He said, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. How many of you know that when the Lord is on your side, everything that you touch will turn to gold? Well, not everything. I mean, most things. Because the Lord is going to help you through, and he's going to bring you through. And the people that are with you, they're going to get to ride on your coattails sometimes. But the people that are against you, if you're for God, then the people will be, just like he said with the children of Israel, the ones that are with them, will be blessed. The ones that are against them will not be blessed. And that's one thing that bothers me about our administration nowadays. When Benjamin Netanyahu came a few months ago over to our country, our vice president nor our president would even meet with him, just miles down the road, could have got to him in minutes, and refused to meet with him. Why? Because they wanted a status quo of going in the opposite direction. They want to ride the fence and say, well, look, we're going to help them by offering them weapons, but we're going to hold these weapons back, but we'll give them these, but we won't give them these. Why? Because they want to try to have some kind of control, and when it comes to God and it comes to his children, you don't have any control. You got to either hand it all over to him, and not just our administration, not just the children of Israel, but right here in this very church, when it comes down, that would be like us. I'm just making a comparison to this. If we were to pay our tithes and say, well, I'm willing to pay my tithes, but I want it to go to this and to that. I mean, and we've got no control of it. Look, paying tithes, it is not a gift, it's a duty. It's something that we have to do. And just like the United States standing with Israel, it is a duty for us to stand with God's people, because he's going to help us prosper, and he's going to help us make it through, because we know that they're going to make it through. But look what he said. He said, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord had made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him. And he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hands. Now, this was a slave boy that had been sold, and now here he is up fixing to be the number 2 man, just because the anointing of God, and he had showed the integrity that he had through God. And sometimes people just make that impression on people. And just like myself in my life, and not that I want to pull my own chain, but every job that I've ever had, when I went there, I treated it just like it was mine. Whether it was on the farm, whether it was in the grocery store, whether it was in construction, whether it was logging. Look, why? Because when I went to work that day, I had the attitude, well, look, if this was my business, how would I want it to be run? When I worked 12 years at Penn Ventilator down there, look, I mean, I treated it just like it was mine, even though we were a union job, and some people just really rode the coattails of the union and needed the union to save the job, but some of us actually went to work. And every job that I've ever left, I left them and them want me not to leave and asking me to stay when it comes up. Even when I worked in construction and my number was randomly pulled out, they said, hey, where you going? And I said, look, my number randomly came up. Look, they bringing the truckload in, taking the truckload out. They said, well, you stand right here. We're going to see if we can get to the bottom of this. And they would try to save my job because they knew they were better off with me than without me. Here, the king knew that he was better off with Joseph than being without him. No matter what his background was, whether he was a Jew, whether he was Egyptian, no matter what, he knew that the hand of the Lord was upon him, and as long as he could be with him, things would continue to prosper and to grow. He said, and Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him. He said, and he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house. And he said, and he hath committed all that he hath in my hand. There is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. And here comes our focal point. He said, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? You know, so we can look at this thing and we can say, well, look, you know, Joseph was put in a situation. He was in a house with his wife, and the only thing that he had to do, he could have went in and lied with this woman and slept with her, and he could have went on his way. Nobody would ever knew. And it may happen again and again and again. But what did Joseph do? He had enough integrity, this man. He said, look, that I was down in prison. He said, look, and remember, he interpreted a dream, and he got overlooked, and when the baker and the chef got out, well, they overlooked him again. And then he spent several more years in prison. And so then one day he got his opportunity to come out, and here he was at the forefront of where he needed to be, and he put his trust in Joseph. But the thing about it was, when Joseph was at this point, he didn't say to her, well, look, I'm not going to sin against your husband. What did he tell him? He said, look, he said, I cannot do this great wickedness and sin against God. Because when we do things, we sin against God. It's not just our brother and our sister, you know, or it's not just our friend or our enemy. It's God. Every sin that we make, we sin against God. And then that's what brings the integrity in us when we start looking at it and we think about integrity as a word itself. We say, well, you know, what is integrity? And integrity is that moral uprightness that a person carries, that they're willing to do the right thing sometimes when it may hurt them. And sometimes when they might not even like that what they're doing, but they say, look, I've got to do the moral thing, I got to do the upright thing, because if I allow my integrity to be tarnished now, then how's that going to look later on down the road? You know, just like with us, with our company, when somebody, and some people, especially in our business, especially with truck drivers, because they short-handed, and, you know, people, it ain't nothing for you to them to take a load of wood to the mill and somebody come and jump up on the side of the truck and try to hire them. Look, I'll put you in a newer truck. I'll pay you a little bit more money. All you got to do is just come to work with us. My boss is giving a $200 sign-up bonus for anybody that I can bring. How much you making now? We'll pay you more. You know, we'll do this, we'll do that. Why? Because they have no integrity. And I've had other loggers to tell me, I say, well, look, we don't hire people out from under the base. I sure will. And, you know, and that's the reason they can't prosper and grow, and they're always behind. And we'll tell them, look, we don't hire anybody that works for somebody else. If you've got a job and you want to change, you go and you tell that man that you don't like working for him, and you give him a 2-week notice. And once you give him a 2-week notice, and then you go on about your business and then come, because we don't want the reputation of downgrading and backstabbing other people. And, you know, just like when people come to us and they say, look, well, do you want to buy this or you want to buy that? We say no. We don't buy stuff from people like that. Well, man, I got this chainsaw for sale. It's brand new. I'll sell it. No, if I need a chainsaw, I'll go to Singletary's up there and buy one. Well, it's brand new. Well, the average person don't walk around with a 20-inch chainsaw. You know what I'm saying? Or a 2-inch wrench or a bucket of hydraulic oil. That means they stole it from somebody. And then look, and we've got enough integrity to say, look, don't bring it to my house, because if you do, the next thing you know, it's going to be a steady flow of people coming wanting you to buy stuff, and people coming looking for stuff. But look, we've got enough integrity, they don't even ask anymore. And they just pass us on by and go to the next person. Why? Because we do our best to try to be upright and moral and righteous in the thing. Look, we try to be sincere and honest. Now look, if somebody gets out of the way now, do we have to do the very best the deacon can and put them back in a little bit? Yes, we do. But the thing about it is, we still have to do it in a way that's upright, that we need to live. And that's what Joseph did here. Joseph, everything that he done, we just read that the Lord had blessed him, and he was blessing the kingdom because of it. But look, with that character that we have, that we continue to follow the Lord, why? Not because we want to satisfy ourselves, not that we want to satisfy our wives and our children in the church, because we want to satisfy God. Because look, if I break down my moral character, then people knows that I'm a deacon at the church, or people knows that I come to New Horizon Church, and then they're going to say, well, look, I don't want to be a part of that because I know what he is. So look, we've got to continue that moral character, that integrity that we needed to be. But then we've also got to have integrity as a group. Because look, a group is only as strong as its weakest link. And look, if we see somebody starting to slip and fall away, we need to help continue to pull them up and bring them back in, because that weakest link, if they fall out, that's what we're going to be judged by. You know, just like we heard the preacher say years ago, telling the story about the pig farmer. You know, he was down in the preacher, and then so he went down there and he bought the ugliest, poorest pig that he had, you know, and he said, look, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to advertise that pig and tell people that's the kind of pig you selling. Well, that ain't the kind of pig I'm selling. They just something wrong with that pig. He's sick. And I was like, right, but I'm going to put it out there that that's what kind of pig you selling. And, you know, to let you know that where you stand at. I heard about a preacher that had went into a barber shop, and he sat down, and he was an evangelist going around, and the barber said, well, preacher, I don't know why you continue to preach the word that you do. He said, because God's not real and nobody's listening. And he said, so why do you continue to preach about a God that ain't real? He said, well, you don't think he's real? We said, no. He said, okay. He got finished cutting his hair. He got up, he brushed him off. He paid the man. He gave him a good tip, and he walked out there, and he seen a homeless man on the street with long hair and a beard. And he said, come here. He said, I want you to come with me. And he walked in, and he told him, he said, look, I'm going to go out there and tell everybody that a barber ain't real. He said, what do you mean? He said, because if a barber was real, this man wouldn't have long hair and a beard the way that he does. He said, well, we are real. That man just hadn't come and seen me. He said, my point exactly. And if you don't go and see God, you're not going to know God. You're not going to be able to get close to him. And just because you ain't come across his path don't mean that he don't know you and that he's not looking for you and looking at you. But look, when you're talking about a group of integrity, we got to have a strong quality, a strong state of being a sound mind, of being whole, and to be undivided. And when we come, look, we can't be bickering and fighting. And like I was talking about this morning, wars in the church and wars in the nation. Look, we've got to be together as one. We've got to stand together as one. And just like several years ago, and I hate that it happened, and I know y'all probably do too, our Baptist Association, we were part of the Baptist Association, and it has been our stance that there's no women preachers in our association, and then they allowed to have one in. Our preacher stepped up against it, and he said, well, look, why are you letting this happen? He kind of kicked against the prick, so to speak. They allowed the woman to come in, and we had to pull out of the association. Why? Because we didn't want our integrity tainted by the decision decision they make. We look at the Methodist Church for years has been going through this split and this division, and now finally they are split up. And now what is it? The United Methodist and the Global Methodist now. So they actually split up. And why did they split up? Because the homosexuality, same-sex marriage that was in the church, they were ordaining women preachers and same-sex marriages that they were allowed to have, and some of them that were married. And I know a lot of Methodists. And when you go by these Methodist churches, even in our very town, they're having to go and take part of the name off, because when this thing was so big and they owned the buildings, and then you got to take the names off of them. But the thing about it is, when they went to change these bylaws, it was voted out. The last vote was 97-3. And we look at that and you say, well, look, at first it was a 50-50 thing, but to change the thing whether to marry them or not. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be anything that you have to go and vote on like that. If you're standing on the Word of God, why should there be any compromise? When you compromise, you feel that you're on the losing side, and that you've got to compromise the situation, and then you have a split. So are we going to stand firm with the Word of God and say, look, that sin is sin, and truth is truth? And so, now we've got a whole church with thousands and thousands of people that split because one believes this way, one believes the other. And the only thing you had to do was just say, look, let's look up the Word of God, see what it is, sit down and pray on it, and see where we need to be at. And we already knew because the Bible speaks against it. But, when you're talking about a congregation and a house that's built on a solid foundation, and that solid rock is Jesus Christ. Something we've got to put that chief cornerstone on. You won't want to go out and build a house in ground that's not going to hold up. And because why? After a while it's going to start sinking and it's going to start falling. Just like we went to Hawaii a few months ago. If we went up there and they said, look, there's a 90% chance that plane will make it to Hawaii. You think we'd have got on it? And said, no. Well, they said, look, give me one that there's 100% chance that I know is going to get on there. And that's the same way it is when you buck up against God or if you're running with God. And God said, look, he didn't promise to smooth sailing, but he promised to save landing. He said, look, if you'll come with me, yeah, you're going to have faults. Yeah, you're going to fail sometime. But if you just get up and you'll keep riding on me, it'll help you out. But you've got to have that healthy body to function properly in the intended purpose, and that's to live on truth and honor and reliability to things that we come that say, look, it's going to be true in season and out of season no matter what. And because we can't back up on the things that we want to do. You remember the first king of Israel was Saul. And God told him, said, look, y'all don't need a king. But they said, yeah, we want a king. He said, you don't need one, because here's what's going to happen. He's going to take this. He's going to put you in service. He's going to put your women in service, children in service. You don't need them. I'm going to lead you. Just like when they were dividing up between the 12 tribes, the Levites didn't even get a portion of the land. He said, why? Because they have me. And that's the only thing that they need. And we realize that the only thing that we need is God, that everything else is going to come into play. But they wanted a king, wanted a king, wanted a king. Why? Because everybody else had a king, they wanted a king. So they went and got Saul. Saul come into this thing half-hearted and stuff. He would do one thing out in the open. He would do another thing out in private. Just like he drove out the meetings in public, but in private he was still calling on these meetings, wanting to try to talk to the dead people and get advice from them. But look, because he was half-hearted, just like the president that we've got, Joe Biden. I mean, well, where's he been since Kamala came on the scene here lately? But you can even put her in the same basket. Look, the man knew when he became president he wasn't fit for the job. The only thing he knew that he had been up there in Washington for 50 years, and look, he's going to come out. He said, look, I'm going to come out. I'm going to be the most outspoken president that there is, and we're going to get this thing done. I'm going to be transparent. But where's he at? He's always in private, never gives interviews, never talks to anybody. If he does, it's just a few minutes here and there with the helicopter so loud you can't even see it, or when he just got finished fumbling off of a bicycle coming off the beach or something, and he's a joke, and he's made us a joke to the rest of the world. Why? Because he don't have the integrity that it needs to be. The man's got more problems in his life over the past 50 years. Look, with his tainted son, money, that he's made more money than he can ever account for. That's in these bank accounts and his whole family's bank account. His reputation is tarnished. Everything about him is tarnished. And look, is that somebody we need to lead in our country, or do we need somebody like Joseph here that's got integrity, that's somebody that's able to stand up and be the person that they need to be? And we look at him and say, look, when it comes time to vote, and say, well, what are we going to do now? Which way are we going to go? We have to vote our conscience and vote our hearts. And we say, look, and people ask me sometimes, younger people, well, I don't know if I'm a Democrat or Republican. And I say, well, let me tell you, here's the difference. You know, if you're looking at somebody, Democrat, say, look, I'm going to give you this. I'm going to give you money. I'm going to give you a check. I'm going to give you this. The Republican says, look, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do what you want to do, to go and make as much as you want or fail as much as you want. But look, when you look on one side, they say, look, we're going to promote abortion. We're going to promote LGBTQ, because we know that Joe Biden married two men himself. We know that Pete Buttigieg is a homosexual. Now look, does that mean that there weren't homosexuals in Trump's cabinet? No, there were people that worked for Trump that was homosexual. But his integrity was, Trump told him, he said, look, I've taught my kids from birth, look, no drinking, no drugs, no smoking, and no tattoos. Why? Because, look, he wanted that strong integrity. Now, look, there's a lot of people been trying to bash him and drag him down, but, of course, he keeps overcoming. Where he stands with the Lord, I don't know. I know I've seen about 20 preachers lay hands on him and pray over him, so I know that the power of God got put on him. I know I've seen him standing at a podium and a bullet come and tip his ear that should have went through the side of his head, so I know that God's got an anointing on him. Whether he's going to win the election or not, I don't know. But we need to vote for a man with integrity, somebody that's lined up the closest thing with God that has my whole lifetime. When we start looking at president after president after president, you say, look, well, who are we lining up best with? And that's the person that's going to line up with some type of integrity, like Joseph, like Jacob, like Abraham, like Isaac. Look, you know, that did have a past. That did have problems, but say, look, I'm going to face up to them and I'm going to overcome them. But look, just like Jacob didn't live a perfect life. We know that Jacob, and I often think about it, and I've mentioned to y'all before, with Jacob shafted Esau out of his birthright. Why did God continue to bless him over and over and over again? And the answer that I always come back to within myself, well, why does God continue to bless us? Because, look, we've done things in our life that we're ashamed of, that we shouldn't have done. That would have been a downfall. It would have been just as bad as Jacob shafting Esau. But look what God did to Jacob. Look, he sent him out there with Laban. He wanted one daughter. He worked, 7 years? And he said, well, look, I'm going to give you your daughter. Well, Laban treated him. He said, well, look, I'll work another 7 years anyway to get the other daughter. I tell you, he wanted that woman. But I'm going to tell you, they worked 14 years for her. He just don't know. They must not make them like that anymore, brother. I don't know. But anyway, I ain't saying. But, you know, look at what he went to, because, look, he had that integrity when he sees something that he wanted. And then after he got her, and Laban said, well, look, I'm going to let you go, but this is mine. And Jacob said, no, it's mine. I'll work even more to get the sheep. He said, look, you take the spotted if you want to. You take the striped, whatever. It don't matter. Well, Laban thought he was going to shaft him. He went and switched him around. But the Lord put his hand on Jacob, and he said, well, that's fine. Now I'll bless you this way. And so everything that he done, the Lord looked at the integrity that he carried. And then what happened, even though he had some downfalls and his shortcomings, what happened with Jacob? Jacob's name was changed to Israel. He had 12 sons. It became the 12 sons of Israel, which was the tribe were distributed out. And because of that moved, because of the integrity that he had, it all fell down to put us where we're at today. And that's all by following men with integrity. You know, so look, when we talk about things like that, a couple of months ago, when we started in the book of Acts, or a few months ago, ever how long it's been, you know, we were reading about when the church went out and sold all their possessions. And the first person that had sold their possession and brought all the money to the church was Barnabas. And when Barnabas done that, he done it wholeheartedly and freely. He went and sold his possessions, he brought it, and he gave the money to the church. Well, then here in Acts 5, verses 1 through 11, what happened right behind Barnabas? Everybody was congratulating. They were happy for him, Barnabas being blessed. Well, Ananias and Sapphira come up and they said, well, look, we're going to sell our possession and we're going to give it to the church also. But what did they do? They went and sold their possession and give part of it to the church. And they didn't give it all. Well, here come Ananias up to Peter, and Peter said, did you sell for such? And he said, yeah, we sold for so much. And then what did Peter tell him? You know, he didn't know. They didn't know the amount unless they was the inside track somewhere. But what did Peter tell him? He said, why do you lie to the Holy Ghost? And, you know, right then, and we know, of course, Ananias, he died, and he was killed. And the Bible says that it was a span of 3 hours that here comes Sapphira. And it come up, and then she told him the same thing. Did you sell for so much? Yeah, we sold for so much. And he said, why did you both combine the lie and have Satan in your heart and in your mind, and your husband's laying out at the feet of the men, and she died, you know, just like that. And he took them out. Why? Not because of possession, because Peter told him. He said, Ananias, he said, look, this land was yours. You could have done what you wanted to with it. And not only that, when you sold it, the money was yours. You could have done what you wanted to with the money. But see, Ananias wanted everybody to think that, look, I'm giving it to the Lord. He wanted that pat on the back. He wanted everybody to look at him, look, that he was the man with the plan. And the only thing he had to do was fall in subjection to the Lord. But he didn't. He wanted to try to trick people and fool people, but he didn't have it in his heart. He didn't have that integrity that he was able to be put where he needed to be. You know, it's kind of like this furniture here. I don't know, we've moved this thing right here a few times. This baby's heavy. This is solid wood right here. And, you know, this is the true blue. But, you know, we can go get one that's made out of veneer and put it right here beside of it. And, you know, it's just got that thin coating of veneer on and won't be nothing but particle board. And then the next time the church, I hope don't. Hopefully we got that problem solved. But then when it does and it gets wet, we'll see it start cracking and swelling up, and we'll realize, look, that it's not real. It looked pretty. We thought it was real. Everything. You remember Solomon's son had went and lost all the stuff in the temple. He got it stolen from him. What he do? He went and put fake stuff looked just like it in there. And knowing it wasn't real, it was fake. The stuff was back in there. But the thing about it wasn't real. And, you know, that's why, just like us as Christians, look, we got to be a piece of real furniture. We got to be a piece of real wood, something that's solid through and through, all the way through. And then when somebody starts whittling us down, and there's going to be another layer of wood, another layer of wood, another layer of wood. Not somebody, if we just walk by and hit some, that once it breaks a chip off of it, it's no good anymore. And that's where that integrity comes in, to be able to stand strong and to do the things that we need to do as Christian people and say, look, no matter what that person goes through, they're true and true who they need to be. In Psalm 25:21, David said, let integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait on thee. And that's what we have to do. Look, when we're persevering and we're going through these things, we have to look just like David did. Because, look, we know that David wasn't a perfect man. But we know that he was a man after God's own heart. And the things that he went through and the things that he suffered through, you know, what was things that shouldn't have been done. But the thing about it is, he asked the Lord, look, to help me to get through these things. I remember hearing a story about a preacher that went and seen two fathers there at two different times, two different occasions. He went to the first father's house, and the father was heartbroken. He was down. His son was hooked on drugs and alcohol and just had all kinds of things going on. Well, the preacher went over there to talk to him and to pray with him, try to console him and give him that positive nudging to continue to go. And the preacher and the daddy said, well, look, he said, ever since he's got on drugs, he does nothing but lie and cheat and steal. He said he's just become nothing but a liar. He has ruined his life. And by that time, the phone rang, and his wife answered the phone, and it was somebody for the man. And the man said, tell him I'm not here. And the preacher looked at him and he thanked himself. He said, well, what made the man a liar? Because he was on drugs or because he see the way that his daddy's living? You know what I'm saying? So sometimes we think that it's the things out there in the world that's bringing them down, but it was us. That father didn't have the integrity to say, well, look, whoever that is, tell him I'm busy with the preacher, I'll call him back. But instead he said, I'm not here. Tell him don't even worry about it. But then he goes to the second father's house on a different day and a different time, and he's sitting there and he's talking to the father, and the father's daughter had the opportunity to get a summer job. Well, she got 2 job offers. One of them was a job that she really wanted, paying good money. All of her friends worked at this particular place, and she really, really wanted that job. And when she hadn't heard back, the other place come up, and she got a job that she really didn't want with people, and with the people, but she was willing to work there for that summer. So then she told the people she'd take the job, and she went to the lesser of the job, and she worked about a week, and then the other job came open. And the place said, look, we're going to hire you. So she went to her daddy, and while the preacher was there, and he said, look, I really don't want to work at this place, and now the job openings come open at the other place and all. Do you mind if I go and quit that job and go to the other job? He said, did you tell the people that you're going to work the whole summer? I said, yeah, I told them. He said, why are we even talking about this? Because, see, he had told her, look, you've got enough integrity. You told these people, give them your word that you were going to work. Then he made the girl work the whole summer. That's the integrity between the 2 different fathers. And, just like here in our very own church, and not just our church, it's other churches also. We had breakfast with Jerry Bullard yesterday morning, William and myself, and we were up there talking, and Jerry said, look, this ball thing, it's not just our church. He said this ball thing is just going crazy everywhere. He said, look, that when they had a ball tournament up there, their church was going to feed some of the people. And Jerry said, walk back there, and he asked the woman that was preparing, he said, how many people are you expecting here today? He said, we're expecting they're going to be 200 people that's going to be part of it. He said, you know how many showed up for the Sunday service? I said, how many? He said, 7. And the same way that we see with our church, well, when you talk to these parents, whether it be the mother and the father, and they say, well, look, well, my kid's on that ball team, and I told them, look, you sign up for this ball team, look, you go into practice, you go into play, and it's their responsibility to go and play. Well, what about the church? What did you tell the church when you come before the church and they said, look, we're going to vote you in as being a member, look, but when we vote you in, we're going to hold you accountable. We want you to be here, being able to serve in the church with nothing else but your presence, just to be able to show up. Because look, there's going to be a point in time that either you're going to get sick or you're going to get old, and you just don't have the physical attributes to go out and clean the church and mow the grass and stuff. But just like Mr. and Miss Hardy used to be, look, they were both old and slow, but when they come in here, look, the thing that they offer to the church, they were here. Every service, they'd walk in here and they'd sit down, walk in, they'd sit down. And that obedience that they had, the integrity that they carried throughout their life, that's what counted. And that's what we have to look at. Look, if you go and sign up for a ball team and say, look, I'm going to be at every game no matter where it's at. When you come and sign up for a church, why don't you have enough integrity to say, look, we all get sick. And sometimes we all might not get off of work early, or we go out of town. But what I'm saying, the integrity in your heart to say, look, I'm going to be there. I'm going to support with my tithes and offerings. I'm going to support with my presence of being there. I'm going to support in any way at all possible. Just like the revival. There were some nights that were pretty sad when it come to revival. But Brother Randy, he's seen it enough. It ain't just our church. His churches all across the country. And even though, he was receptive to it, heard the preacher's feelings, heard the deacon's feelings. But the thing about it is, look, that's why we need strong people with integrity. 2 Wednesday nights ago, we were sitting here at the choir practice, and the preacher said a mouthful. He told the truth. He said, look, not every church is meant for the pews to be full, or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. He said, look, the pews ain't, well, of course we want them to be, but that's not God's intention for them to be full all the time. Because look, we would rather have the quality versus the quantity. Look, somebody that knows how to pray, somebody with enough integrity. Look, when I get down, that somebody's going to be able to pray me through something, pray me through a situation when it comes down to it. And when I tell people, say, look, if it ever comes down to somebody praying, who do I want praying for me? The Sunday night crowd and the Wednesday night crowd. You know, not just the Sunday morning crowd. I look nothing against them. I love them just the same. But I want the people that's going to be here, hey, on Sunday night and Wednesday night, because I know that they're the true blue of the heartbeat of what the church is. Here he said, look, he said, when we look at things and we look at the things that we do as integrity, I was thinking, you know, we got a few rental houses, and in years past, we used to hold houses for tenants. They'd come up and give me word, look, I want to rent this house if you can. If you hold it for me for 2 weeks, I'll come and rent it. Well, it's okay. Well, we'd hold that house for them, and then in 2 weeks come, well, I changed my mind, I don't want to come. And, you know, so after a while, what happened, and I've seen people, before I've been at people's houses, they call the auto parts, and they say, hey, have you got a so-and-so for a so-and-so, so-and-so? They say, yeah, put it on the counter, or I'll be right there. And they'd hang up the phone and say, I ain't going to get that thing, it's overpriced. And I said, well, man, why did you tell that man that you were going to get that part? I said, because what you have done now, if somebody else calls up there to get a part, because you have done this so many times, they quit going and pulling the part till you get there. And then when you get there, instead of walking in the door and being able to get that part, now you got to go wait for them to go by and see if they got it, because of people just like you. And you know, and because you don't have enough gumption to tell them, look, you know, that's a little bit high, don't worry about it. I'll check you out later on. You know, years ago, we had a truck driver that came and wanted a job. He was driving a beer truck, and he had got saved. And he came to us wanting a job, and he said, look, he said, I've got saved. He said, but I'm driving a beer truck, making good money. And he told me what he was making. I said, and at the time, that was pretty good money. And he said, I just don't feel right driving a beer truck, working for a beer company, and I just got saved. I got to change. And I said, well, here's what we're willing to do. We'll give you the job if you want it. You're going to turn in your notice and you work it out, because, you know, I know how it is. I'm a Christian too. And he said, all right. He said, yeah, I want a job. I said, but you're not going to make nowhere near the money with us as you do with them. You know, because, look, sin pays. I mean, you know, it's out there. They make money. But anyway, I said, you know, well, I tell you what, I'm going to quit, and I'm coming to work for you, because my integrity is worth more than that job. My salvation is worth more than that job. I said, okay, never seen the man again in my life. Held the job for him for a little while. He never showed up. But, you know, so what is our integrity worth when we're looking at salvation, eternal life, or either, look, I can be the same way. And I'm not downing that man. The thing that I'm downing is he told me, he said, look, I want to come to work for y'all. Even though it's not as much money, I want to come to work for you. But see what he done, he was blinded by that dollar figure, and he was willing to compromise his integrity and continue to do what he was doing. You know, and just like another man that owned a store that we used to stop by and get a little hot dog, a little barbecue sandwich and all. His biggest money maker was beer. He got saved on a Sunday. He walked into the store on Monday. He said, we're going to quit selling beer. When the beer truck come by to deliver the beer, he said, look, don't deliver no more. Take what you got out. He said, and take it with you. The man's dead and gone now, and the store's closed down. But for the rest of the time that the store was there, you walk in and them empty coolers was there. But he made his money off a hot dog, drink, and barbecue sandwiches. Why? Because he stuck with the Lord, and his integrity was, look, I don't need to profit off of that beer anymore, because I'm going to profit off the Lord, and that's all that he needed. You know, when we look at people, and like some preachers, and we look at people like Billy Graham, somebody that's moral and upright, and I've seen the other day, a clip with him, I think, where Paul Harvey was going to interview him, and he said, look, he said, when people look at you as the United States preacher, the preacher that holds the United States together, he said, I'll look at it, he said, as a world evangelist. Why? Because he went to so many different places and to so many different hearts, because he didn't care who you were. He had the integrity to say, look, I'm willing to go to this place and to this place and to this place, and I'm going to spread the gospel. I'm not going to compromise my integrity nowhere where I go. I seen a interview with this man that had popped up on my phone. He was from another country, had an accent and stuff, and Billy Graham was preaching at a revival. We know how big the stadiums were, and he was out on the football or the baseball field or whatever, and this man hated Billy Graham so much. He got 9 of his other friends, there were 10 of them, they were going to assassinate Billy Graham. And every one of them, this before everybody was checking for guns and stuff, this was years ago. And so each one of them, they went and got what guns they could find, little 6-shooters, revolvers, whatever they could find, something that they could contain. And they went down and they sat on the front row. They had to sit on the ground because there were so many people there. And when they did, they come up, but the anointing of God was so strong on Billy Graham, and he stood there and he preached the message, and they said, look, when they made the altar call, we're going to get up to walk up, and all 10 of us is going to gun him down right here in front of all these people, whether we die, whether we get away with it or not. And right before the altar call, the Lord got on those people, and 9 out of the 10 got saved, and the other one turned and ran. So, look, that is integrity. That is somebody that's willing to stand up and say, look, I'm with the Lord no matter what happens. I'm with him. He said, look, but here, when we look at people and we see them all around, have you ever had anybody to come up to you and say, look, man, I got to tell you something. I ain't going to tell you no lie. We got a truck driver. I love him. He's dumb as dirt, but I love him to death. But the first thing he said when he comes up to you, man, I'm going to tell you something. I ain't going to tell you no lie now. And why does he have to tell me that? Because his integrity has been so tarnished and so beaten down. Everybody knows when he walks up to you, he's going to tell you a lie. So he has to start apologizing before he gets to you and say, look, I ain't going to tell you a lie. And me tell him, say, yeah, you are. Yeah, you going to tell me a lie? I know, because 9 times out of 10 you tell me a lie. Look, and I love him to death, and look, we witnessing to him, we're trying to get him right, but just some people's like that. But what I'm getting at, if you've got to apologize before you speak to somebody and you say something, they already know where you at. Your integrity is tarnished, it is beat down, it's nothing. And just like Joseph, he said, look, I'm not going to sin against God. And that's what we need to do. We need to look and say, look, that I'm not going to sin against God. I want to stand strong. I want my belief to be right. And whether you see me on a Monday or a Friday or a Sunday, that I'm going to be that same person, and I'm going to try to be upfront and honest with you. And, just like David. We talked about David being a man after God's own heart. And look, we know that David looked on Bathsheba. We know that he wanted her. We know that he sent for her. We know that he come up here and she brought him up. We know that she ended up getting pregnant and he ended up murdering her husband and all these things that went through. But God still held close to God. And when all these things happened, and you remember him and Nathan were sitting out on the balcony looking out, and Nathan went to tell him about this story about this sheep. And David was like, yeah, well, what would you do with this man? Well, this man deserved death. And Nathan told him, he said, thou art the man. And, it's easy for us to look at other people and point out that they're false, but then look back at us. And Nathan, once he pointed that out, and Psalm 51 said, David said, have mercy on me, O God. And that's what we have to do. Sometimes even though other people points out our fault, we have to look at them and say, Lord, have mercy upon me, O Lord, because I'm the one that sinned. I'm the one that fell back. Look, I can't blame it on you, and I can't blame it on you because I slipped up and I messed up. Proverbs 11:3 said, the integrity of the upright shall guide them. And look, why? Because we're supposed to be the upright people. And if we're the upright people, and that integrity of the upright is going to guide us. God's going to guide us, and he's going to lead us where we need to be. And sometimes churches and preachers can get hung up in it. I'm not calling any names. I'm not talking about anybody in particular that we know. But sometimes churches and preachers can get hung up and want bigger congregations and make more money, that their integrity gets compromised and stuff. And that's why I'm glad that we've got a preacher that'll tell people, say, look, we're not in the people stealing business. If you don't have a church, we would love to have you here. But if you do have another church, you need to be in your church. I remember years ago, the Lord told me to stop by somebody's house and witness to them and stuff. And I said, yeah, well, I'm going to get it, put it on the back burner, kind of pushed it off. Well, anyway, the next week, told me, look, go and talk to the person and stuff, because I'd seen them out there mowing the grass on Sunday. And I was like, well, yeah, I need to go and talk to the person and all. And so anyway, finally, the pull got so strong. When he told me, he said, look, I told you to go to that person's house. One day when I was on the way home from work, all dirty and greasy after a hard day of logging, this before we got the new equipment, if we had older equipment, you really get dirty. We don't get dirty anymore. We look like this when we come out of the woods. But thank the Lord, we've made it at that point. But I went to this person's house and I knocked on the door. The woman came to the door and I said, can I talk to your husband? Can I talk to the man of the house? And she said, yeah, I'll get him. The man of the house, he came to the door and I said, look, we go out to New Horizon Church. If we want to talk to you about the Lord and go to church. He said, yeah. He said, well, I go to church. And I said, oh, you do? And I was kind of slapped in my face. And I thought, well, I just seen this man mowing grass. So where you go to church at? He said, I go right down here to Clarendon. And I said, oh. Within eyesight of the church. And I'm thinking to myself, well, here, I thought I was fitting to win me a soul. I was still a young Christian, still a young deacon at the time. Boy, I thought I was fitting to pick me one in because God sent him to me. But then I realized that God had sent me to that man not to come to New Horizon, but maybe to point out his fault and his integrity. Say, look, well, why are you down here mowing your grass on Sunday and your church is down there having church down there? And maybe you need to get down into there. And, but I'll let the Lord deal with him the way that he sees fit. But the only thing that we could do, and I'm finished, Stephanie, but the only thing we can do, we need to have that integrity in ourselves to say, look, what are we going to do? Where are we going to stand at? What's our integrity going to be like? Are we going to be just like the rest of the world where we talk to and fro and people can't depend on nothing we say and we walk up and they say, look, there's nothing that I want to hear that they got to say because, look, they're just like the wind that's blowing to and fro here and there. But look, let's have enough integrity to stand on the Word of God and to be like Joseph. And let me read this last part again, the focal verse, that what Joseph said to them and what we should say. He said, look, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? So look, when we have these things come up in our life, say, look, how can I do something that's going to sin against God? Not against Kenny, not against William, but against God. Because everything that I do wrong is against God. Not my brother and my sister, but against God. And we take that stance and say, look, I want to satisfy him and I want to make everything right with him. Keep that integrity and we'll get the blessings the same way that Joseph did. Because we know that Joseph ended up through God's help. Well, God ended up saving the country, but by the hand of Joseph and using him. But then what happened, if we go all the way to the end of Genesis, what happened when Joseph dies at the age of 110 years old and a couple of generations, Joseph was forgot about. Everything went right back to the way it was, and we just have to realize, look, while we're here and we're able to put our mark on things, continue to stand up and hold that integrity we need to do. As we sing, everybody stand to their feet, please.